First, I should say that we will record this one because we know that people can't join. It's lots of program, but so it's easier to look afterwards also for some. So we will start. So good morning, everybody, and good afternoon to my friends, new friends in South Korea. And My name is Ann-Sofie Backren, and I work as a Swedish-speaking coordinator, networking coordinator at the Finnish Rural CAP Network. And I also have my colleague with me, Tuomas.
Hyvää huomenta kaikki.
Yes, and together we will host this webinar today, and we will talk about a South Korean concept called HANSALIM. I didn't know anything also about HANSALIM, but this summer I took part in the Finnish big um, rural fair, agriculture fair in Seinäjoki, and I met Thomas Snellman, Mr Reko in Finland, and he started to talk about HANSALIM. And I thought this is something that we could lift up when we arrange our networking morning, or as we said in Swedish, nätverksmorgon, or in Finnish, Verkostoaamut. So we connected Jonathan in South Korea, Jonathan Dolley, a researcher, and I'm really happy that you have a possibility to join us this morning in Finland and this afternoon in South Korea. Uh, as I said, HANSALIM is quite unknown concept, but we already heard that the Finnish Agriculture Ministry, Forest Ministry, Antonia Husberg, she also visited South Korea some years ago, and she also heard about this concept. So I think it's coming close, but I think we need more information, and for that we really need Jonathan to open up this item. But as I understood, it is a kind of movement today, and this is also similar what we have in Finland when we talk about this record. So that's why also we will have some comments later on from Thomas Snellman, what this perhaps can mean from a Finnish context. But you are all warmly welcome. And we will talk English here, but it's also possible to raise questions both in Finnish and Swedish. You can use the chat, but first I will give the floor to Jonathan, and we are really looking forward to hear more about this HANSALIM concept. So warmly welcome to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just share my screen. So, yeah. Can everyone see that okay?
Perfectly.
Good. Okay, so I've been introduced, so I'll skip that part. But just to say that for the past 4 years, I've been living in South Korea doing research about HANSALIM. And the research that I've been doing is to write a book about HANSALIM for a European audience, aimed at practitioners, not an academic book, but a more practical kind of description of HANSALIM's history and how it all works. And so today I'm going to kind of squeeze as much information as I can about HANSALIM into 20 minutes. And then in a few months' time, when the book is finished, you'll be able to read all the detail. Okay. So I'll try to cover the following aspects of HANSALIM in the next 20 minutes. So a brief history, followed by an explanation of the values of HANSALIM as a movement. It's known as the life movement. And then how those values are put into practice from the point of view of producers and consumer members. And then I'll describe the business model and finally give a quick overview of the whole movement and how its organizations fit together. Okay. So this is a very complex diagram, and I don't need you to look at it or understand everything, just the orange text at the bottom. So this is a timeline of Korean history. And I want you to notice on the orange arrows indicating that South Korea was ruled by a series of of dictatorships until 1987. So the first democratic elections took place in 1987. Um, and so it's had a very short history of democracy. And so in 1986, when HANSALIM was born, pro-democracy protesters were out in the streets fighting with police and trying to escape from tear gas. And in the midst of that turmoil, to see a small group of farmers and housewives opening a small rice store in the center of Seoul, it seemed quite a foolish, fairly insignificant thing to do in those circumstances. But the creation of that first store, which was called HANSALIM Nongsan, I think was actually a radical act of resistance and hope in the face of that political uncertainty. And the men and women who opened HANSALIM Nongsan, they belonged to a cooperative of producers and consumers in a city called Wonju, which was about an hour away from Seoul. And for them, that store represented a first step in launching an ecological alternative movement that had been gathering support in Wonju and the surrounding areas since the late 1970s. And the founders of that movement were known as the Wonju Group. So the Wonju Group were a diverse collection of Catholic farmers, urban housewives, pro-democracy activists, some artists, poets, a songwriter was involved even, and various academics. And they had been involved in the credit union movement in Wonju that was founded in the 1960s. They had witnessed the destructive tendencies of capitalist industrialization in their own country and socialist industrialization, albeit in a different, much less successful mode in North Korea. And they were looking for an alternative in the cooperative movement. But they, through their experience in the credit union movement and setting up consumer cooperatives in Wonju, they'd realized that the cooperative movement itself was also vulnerable to the same mistake that lay at the heart of industrial civilization. Um, and that mistake, they thought, was to assume a materialist, mechanistic view of the world, which viewed humans and all life as replaceable parts in the machine of economic growth. And it was this worldview that they argued that gave rise to the characteristics of domination and alienation, separation and oppression in modern society. So, as an alternative, they proposed a worldview founded on the sacredness and interconnectedness of all life. And they drew on traditional Korean ideas, took on some Catholic social teaching. Many of the founders were actually Catholics, Catholic farmers, and but they kind of synthesized this worldview or an eco-philosophy, which was first outlined in the Wonju Report in 1982. And then as the movement began to grow, the Wonju Group set up the first life cooperative in Wonju. And the significance of the word life in the title I'll discuss a bit later. That was 1985. Then they set up the HANSALIM Nongsan rice store, as I've mentioned already. And that in that way, they brought together organic farming and direct trade with equal participation of consumers and producers, something which hadn't really been done until that point. And so next, the Wonju Group hosted a year-long process of study and discussion to develop the HANSALIM Manifesto that was published in 1989, and that launched the HANSALIM movement formally. And that's recently been translated into English, actually, and I was involved in that project. So I can share a link to the English version of the manifesto for you to read yourselves if you're interested. So to the values of the movement. At its simplest, the HANSALIM Life movement is a relationship of mutual responsibility between rural and urban communities. So the core of HANSALIM's approach is expressed in this phrase: let the producer take responsibility for sustaining the consumer's life and the consumer for sustaining the producer's livelihood. However, this mutual responsibility is about much more than simply direct sales, because it also encompasses a shared commitment to protecting and restoring ecosystems and working for wider social and cultural change towards justice and peace. So the goal of HANSALIM is captured in its name, the name itself. So the word HANSALIM is made up of two separate words. The first, Han, contains simultaneously a meaning of collectively one and individually one, of spreading out and gathering in. And in ancient Korean philosophy, it's used to refer to the divine spirit or the life of the universe, which permeates all things living and inanimate and integrates the universe into an evolving cosmos. And then the word salim has two meanings. The first is housekeeping, and the second, I guess, grows out of that meaning of housekeeping, which is nurturing. And this has the connotation of saving or restoring or bringing back to life. So through the name of HANSALIM, you can see that the relationship between producer and consumer also encompasses the goal of nurturing and reviving all things. That is bringing all into a flourishing shared life together. And so the word HANSALIM is used as a verb actually to refer to this action. And so many among HANSALIM members, the word Salim is used to express their purpose in their various activities. So there's four phrases that are used to sum up the mission of HANSALIM. So the first one is Papsang Salim, which means nurturing food. And that refers to the goal of providing consumers with safe, healthy, eco-friendly food and other household goods. And it defines the responsibility that producers adopt for the life of consumers. And actually, the word papsang that's paired with salim in this phrase actually means dining table, which I think the significance of that is that it's referring to the act of sharing a meal, not simply to consuming food. So it's a communal action. And then second, nurturing agriculture. So this refers to the goal of securing stable and sustainable livelihoods for producers. And that defines the responsibility which consumers adopt for the livelihoods of rural farmers. And then thirdly, nurturing life. So this expresses the responsibility of care for others, both human and non-human, which is shared by all of the members of HANSALIM and is worked out through outward focused activities such as promoting eco-friendly farming, environmental campaigning, education and social welfare projects, but also through training in inward contemplative and reflective practices. And then finally, nurturing community. So this emphasizes the need to strengthen local community resources and relationships and to reach out to one's neighbors in need. So since starting to put this philosophy into practice through a model of multi-stakeholder democratic cooperation, HANSALIM has grown into a national federation with sales in 2023 of around 320 million euros. And so along this journey, what has HANSALIM become? And so I'm going to tackle this question from the bottom up. First, from the rural or the producer perspective, and then from the urban or the consumer perspective. Okay. So the producer community is the smallest level of organization in HANSALIM. So in these communities, farming is done together by a group of family farms who partner with one another to plan and coordinate their production, to share knowledge and labor, and to manage shared facilities and equipment. And so to join HANSALIM as a producer, you would join one of these communities and receive training in eco-friendly farming and HANSALIM's production and processing standards. I think in the picture on the slide, you can see Thomas Snellman there with our friends on our trip in May. This was a visit to a HANSALIM community in May that we did. So there are 136 producer communities, which cultivate a total of 11,300 acres. In addition to the producer communities, there are 110 processing units which process raw materials from HANSALIM's producers. And they also handle seafood and other products from local, organic, and environmentally friendly sources. The producer organizations are then brought together into 15 regional federations and one processor federation. And they have their own elected representatives, which together form HANSALIM's National Producer Federation, with their own elected president and employed staff. And many of these regional federations actually pool resources to run local distribution hubs with their own processing facilities, some of which you can see on the screen here. And some have also created complex systems to process and recirculate farm wastes as inputs between multiple local farms. And this is a system that HANSALIM calls circulating farming. So to the urban communities. So when you join HANSALIM as a consumer, you become a member of your local life cooperative. So the word life is significant because these cooperatives are not like the conventional consumer cooperatives that you would encounter in Europe or America. Their focus is not only on responsible consumption, but also they're seeking to live together in solidarity with one another as urban residents, but also with producers and their rural communities. So each life co-op in HANSALIM is its own democratic autonomous organization, which is formed by members to carry out their collective activities. And these include setting up and running HANSALIM stores, organizing charitable and cultural and educational activities. And they also organize joint activities between the rural producers and urban consumers. There's just some numbers on the screen there of how much it costs to become a member. With a quick glance, you can see it's not much. It's quite easy to become a member as a consumer. So there are 27 of these live co-ops which run the local retail stores in their own regions. There's about 200, I think at last count, 242 in total. And so in a HANSALIM shop, you can buy virtually everything you need, from food to household goods, and even cosmetics. And HANSALIM stores sell almost exclusively their own branded products from HANSALIM producers or processors, with a few exceptions for some household items that they can't make themselves, and a handful of fair trade products have arrived in recent years. And so HANSALIM branded sales through the Business Federation are supplemented by local goods that are sourced by each store according to the decision of the life co-op that manages that particular store. So some stores, for example, would purchase from local farmers who don't have a direct relationship with HANSALIM. And that's their prerogative to do so. And so what this means is that there's usually one type of everything you need in a HANSALIM store rather than multiple brands of the same product. So that means the shop size is relatively small. Did you see that? Here we go. As you can see from the photos on here, did I include one of the store? Maybe not. Okay, I'll move on. So in addition to the stores, the life co-ops also run food life education and training. Many of them have community kitchens. They run campaigns and community building activities. And some of them have also set up new cooperatives in different sectors like solar power and in the care sector. Okay, so this urban-rural solidarity is, I think, for me, one of the most important parts or important aspects of HANSALIM. So from the beginning of HANSALIM, relationship building among consumers and between consumers and producers has been the top priority. And there are various ways that consumers can build community together and participate in the livelihoods of producers. And these are supported by HANSALIM's organizing activists. So that's a consumer member who's received special training and receives an hourly wage for organizing the interactions between consumer members and producer communities. So I've listed a few of the different types of activity on the slide here, but I won't go into detail. And so the high point of the producer-consumer interactions, I think, are the HANSALIM festivals. And these are held at national and local levels. So one example of a festival that I attended was the Autumn National Festival, which brought together hundreds of producers and thousands of consumers together for kind of a shared picnic for drinking and traditional games and dancing. You can see some of the photos of those activities here. So this chart gives you an idea of the amount of interaction between consumers and producers in the course of a single year. So this shows the number of person visits categorized by each life co-op and by the type of activity. So exchange, the green colored one, refers to activities involving interaction between producers and consumers. And then engagement refers to activities among consumers themselves. So that's the orange bar. So you can see if you add them up, there's a total of around 59,000 encounters between individuals in 2023 that were directly facilitated by HANSALIM's member life co-ops. So you get a sense of the sheer scale of the relationship building that's going on within HANSALIM. And these are activities that are supported by funds allocated in the budgets of the life co-ops and also the HANSALIM Federation, which ultimately comes from their combined sales, which brings me smoothly to HANSALIM's business model. So in simple terms, the HANSALIM business model can be described as a contract-based direct sales arrangement in which prices and quantities are agreed annually in advance by producers and consumers with support from HANSALIM's professional teams. However, it's also a flexible system that makes it quite complex, as you will now see. So firstly, HANSALIM's production system allows for a wide range of production philosophies and techniques among member producers to ensure that producers have a maximum autonomy. So there is no one way of being a HANSALIM producer. Secondly, transparency with consumer members is ensured through HANSALIM's own labeling system. So products are labeled into 4 categories: organic, pesticide-free, low pesticide, and domestic. And so all of these 4 categories, HANSALIM standards are stricter than the national safety standards, and products are tested regularly for residues, contaminants, and radiation as appropriate. So this helps to create a stronger trust between consumers and producers. And then thirdly, HANSALIM producers are not locked into exclusive supply contracts, but they have the freedom to supply whatever proportion of their crop they want to HANSALIM, while simultaneously they can supply the remaining portion through other channels such as government purchasing schemes for local schools, and that's quite a common thing for HANSALIM producers. And so fourth, the contract-based system is supplemented by a demand-based system arrangement to allow greater flexibility for producers. So when you put all that together, it means that within and between producer communities, the level of specialization or circular integration is decided by the producers themselves. So this makes for an astonishingly diverse range of production operations, which are each tailored to the local soil and climate conditions, the preferences of the producers themselves. But it also helps to ensure a stable and guaranteed income to as many farmers as possible. So let's just have a look very quickly at the distribution of the flow of goods, if you like. So this diagram shows you the flow of goods by tons according to the production type on the left, crop type in the center, and supply type on the right. So you can see that the majority is organic and supplied through the contract system, but there's still a wide range. So for example, fruits, if you look at fruit, um, there's a portion of fruits which is supplied as a low pesticide product because certain fruits are just prohibitively difficult to grow without the use of some limited use of pesticides. So that allows for that situation. So finally, what does this quantity of supply mean in terms of revenue distribution? So HANSALIM's policy has always been to return as much of the sales value to producers as possible. Until recently, margins have been well below 30%. So HANSALIM has been able to return 73% or more of the product price to producers. But the margin has been under pressure for a few years now. So it currently stands at just over 31%. So that leaves about 69% for producers. And this table shows the breakdown of what that margin covers. So you see the largest portion goes to the life co-ops, the business federation, as in the largest portion of the margin. And the business federation takes 8%, and the HANSALIM federation itself 0.81%. So the remainder then goes to the producer communities. So this shows you the flow of value. So from the left, it's the sales divided by the federation products and local products. So you see the majority is federation products on the left, sold through each of the life co-ops in the center, and then the portion of that value that's returned to the different types of organization on the right. So you see the producers receive the largest share there. Okay, so I think I might be over time, but I have just one more slide. Is it all right to present that?
Yes, of course.
Okay, cool. So this is kind of the finale, I suppose. So this is a diagram of HANSALIM's various organizations and how they relate to each other. And they're laid out in order of how authority is delegated from the top to the bottom. So from top to bottom, left to right. So at the top, you can see the individual members, 890,000 corporator households, and 3,579 producers. So those are the owners of HANSALIM. And so below them, you can see the life co-ops, different organizations of which these members are a part, the producer organizations and the support organizations. And then in the box labeled member organizations, autonomous activities, I've listed the numbers of people involved in basically the activities that those organizations run for themselves. So you can see there's a lot of people involved at that level. The word practitioner here is HANSALIM's term for employed staff member. And activist, as I mentioned before, refers to consumer members who are paid for one of two things, either to organize producer community activities or to work in the stores. And so between them, the member organizations together elect 212 delegates to the General Assembly of the HANSALIM Federation. So that's the kind of decision-making body that's delegated from the members. And then the General Assembly elects a board of 36 directors, which stand for a maximum of two-year terms. The board appoints the executive directors of the federation, the business federation, and the support organizations, but they cannot interfere with the governance and management of the member organizations. And then the standing committees, conferences, and steering committees are where all the deliberations take place over policy and strategy decisions. So obviously each local co-op has their own committees, and then at the national level you have the equivalent committees, and these involve producers, consumers, and employees together. So as you can imagine, making such a large organization work in a democratic way is very, very hard, extremely hard work. So if you were in it for the money, you would not do it this way. But through the course of my interviews, every member of HANSALIM that I've spoken to so far is not, their involvement is not about money, but about being part of a community dedicated to caring for each other and to creating a peaceful and thriving future for the world. And so while doing that, if they are able to make a living, then they are able to create a self-sustaining movement with an economic base. And that I think is kind of the I guess the most special thing about HANSALIM from my point of view. So that's me, I'm done. That's the end. If you need more information, there's my project website. The HANSALIM Federation website is there, and the research organization that HANSALIM runs is the Moshe Salim Research Institute, and that's who I'm currently affiliated with. And there's my acknowledgement of funding from the EU. There, so that's my job done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
That was a lot of
Overran
information.
a little bit. Yeah, I practiced that several times to try and make it fit. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you so much also.
Okay.
Do we have any comments or reflections from or questions at this moment? I don't think so.
Maybe we should give Thomas the floor right
Yeah.
away.
I think I'm really curious. Thank you, Jonathan, for a really interesting introduction. And now I'm really curious to hear what Mr. Reko Thomas Snellman from Pedersör in Ostrobotnia says about this concept. And it's also lucky for us that we know that you have been there in South Korea and learned about it on site. So we are really curious to hear your comments. So please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ann-Sofi, and good morning to everyone also from my part. 7 months ago, I received a message from an American living since 20 years in Norway. He wanted me to join a delegation to South Korea to examine a concept. We had briefly met 7 years ago when I was introducing Reko in Norway, so that was our only connection at the moment. Normally, I was a little bit, I couldn't understand the system, but when he wrote in his message that the farmers get about 70% of the final price for products sold in 240 stores. I couldn't believe it. It was totally out of possibilities. I couldn't understand, because since we have in Finland, and I think also the rest of Europe, we have been struggling with that the farmers and producers weak position in the value chain. And if someone says that it's possible that they have a system that gives the farmer 70%, so of course I was that triggered me a little bit, and I accepted, and I said I can join this delegation from Europe if you want me, and I saw it also as quite a personal trust that someone wanted me to do it, because I never heard about HANSALIM before, and it was totally unexpected when I received the possibility to join the delegation. So in May 2000 this year, I went to South Korea without knowing anyone the other in the group. I traveled by myself from Helsinki to Seoul, and Jonathan picked me up from the airport. And first, I need to give a very big thank to Jonathan and his wife and all the other stuff around, because they had prepared such an extremely well organized trip. You can't imagine. I stayed there for about 1 week, but I afterwards it had been a lot of work to put this trip together, and we was visiting a lot of different stakeholders in the organization. Since I was the only farmer in our delegation, when we went to see the farmers, local farmer groups, I felt that they found me particularly interesting, since they could discuss with the farmer from Europe. But we also went to see processing units, the logistical center. We went to a seed saving unit. We went to the stores, and we were also invited to a national event. So we had the possibility to meet the leading persons in the organization, and I had the pleasure to discuss personally with the president in this HANSALIM cooperation. So I feel very privileged. At the same time, as I said, they were very, very well prepared. So they had also produced an information package in English with all information, and it was extremely lot of work to do this. And they had done it, as I saw it, only for us. I don't know if it's right, but it seems like they had only they did it to give it to us. So while visiting South Korea, I was more or less stuck into this. I couldn't. It was always on my mind. I tried to figure out, would it be possible to create something similar in Finland or in Europe? Of course, we have cultural differences, so it's not so easy to take it directly to Europe or Finland. As I saw it in South Korea, they work in a more like collective context, and as Jonathan already explained in his presentation. And in Europe, we are more individual and egocentric. We want to decide for ourselves. So I don't think it's possible to transfer HANSALIM as whole, but I think it could be used partly. And since I've been like involved in the Reko concept, I already have a lot of stakeholders that I see could be useful to create a context that we could take given parts from this HANSALIM initiative. I'm also involved in a European group for the moment that are planning for the same. This is not only like going on in my mind, because all the other persons involved on this trip were also very, very impressed by what we saw in South Korea. So for the moment, we have an international group here in Europe that are looking for the possibility to implement parts from HANSALIM in different European countries. And we already have initiatives started in Austria and the Netherlands, also in Norway. And we have monthly web meetings to discuss our experiences and how to proceed in this context to go forward and to benefit from each other's experiences. I invented the Reko concept, but I don't see HANSALIM as a threat towards Reko. I see it more like a complement. They could benefit from each other in a very good way, I think. So if the result at the end would be that it could strengthen the producer's position in the value chain, I would be very glad. We also have in Western Europe, we have these cooperatives. And why doesn't these work as good as the one in South Korea? And why is HANSALIM so successful? As I see it, is that the HANSALIM covers the whole chain from production to the consumer. Here in Finland, we have like the producer cooperatives that sells to the Coop stores, but in South Korea they have the whole chain and can that gives them the benefit to plan, and I don't see in front of me that we could achieve the same percentage for the producer at the end. But even if we could get partly on this way, it could benefit a lot. And I see also that if such a movement would start in Europe and Finland, the other stakeholders on the area have to take this movement into consideration, and they have to. I think they have to change their attitude towards consumers and against the producers and the position for the producer in the value chain. So I don't know where this will end up, but if someone is interested to discuss with me, I will be open for this, and I hope that it seems like it will be started in parts of Europe anyway. So we just have to follow the experience that will show up in the near future, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for your comments. It was also really interesting to hear your aspects of this concept. Thomas, do we have any comments here in the chat? There was some asking for the...
At least contact details have already been exchanged. At this point, I stopped the recording, so the threshold to ask questions is lower even by opening microphone or video. So now I will stop recording, and thank you for watching the recording if you watched it in advance.